Second. There you go. So how I'm envisioning this is going to work anyways is we're going to ask you a couple questions. I have a list here that is from the email I sent you, and I'm going to ask you one question. Megan's going to follow up with the next question, and we're going to kind of alternate until we finish. At most, this shouldn't take any more than an hour, maybe even less than that if we get to the questions really quickly. And just please feel free to speak however you want. And this is like very organic, so guide it however you want. We'll ask questions based off of whatever answers you have, and we'll work it out from there. I've really enjoyed like the book you've written, Bonnie's Rocket. It's really, really fun, especially since my brother is going into STEM. I've been able to show him this book too, and he's like, "Ooh, this is actually really cool."
Awesome.
So without further ado, do you have any questions before we begin by any chance?
No, I think ready to go when you are.
Awesome. All right. So our first question is, could you tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to create this book, Bonnie's Rocket?
Absolutely. So the inspiration actually came from my grandfather's story. So my yaya was a Chinese American immigrant, and he came to this country, and he actually, through various challenges, ended up actually working for Grumman Aerospace, which actually became the contractor for the NASA's Apollo missions.
Amazing.
So, coming from China, it was a hard life back then. It was during kind of a war period. And so he ended up coming here to help support his family and started out working, designing air conditioning units of all things. And from that, he ended up learning, how do we keep, people safe and in good temperatures? And then he ended up designing life support system on fighter jets. And then from there, ended up working on the lunar modules, which is the part of the spacecraft that lands on the moon. So growing up hearing his stories really inspired me. And I wanted to share how Chinese American immigrants were a part of this huge accomplishment.
And were you born here in the United States after your parents immigrated over?
Yes. So on my father's side, so this is my paternal grandfather, and he came here. So my dad was actually born here. So this is set, actually, the book is set in the 1960s. So I wasn't around actually for the Apollo 11 moon launch and landing, but I basically set the story so it's kind of a generation above me. So Bonnie is similar to what my dad was like at that time.
That's awesome. And when you were listening to these stories from your grandfather and you're hearing all this about how he went from working on air conditioning to fighter jets and then all the way to the life support systems in NASA, was there a specific moment that you were like, oh my goodness, I have to write this book to share this story with everyone else? Like an aha moment?
Yeah, actually it was funny because my aha moment came a little later when I was watching Hidden Figures. And that was talking about basically this whole group of women that we didn't know was behind, helping this happen. And so kind of illuminating those other hidden figures that there are, in the story of this huge accomplishment that we had. And I think for my grandfather, it was always a joy, and he always loved telling these stories. So for me, it was a way of also memorializing them and honoring him and his story.
And with your grandfather's encouraging words to you, was there any specific thing that he was really trying to push you towards doing, or were there any things that he said to you that really made a big impact on your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he was just a really inspiring figure in my life, overcoming so much adversity. I think that was always something that really inspired me. He never really pushed me in terms of doing, STEM myself or something. I think it was just something that he was really passionate about, and he loved math. And sometimes he would quiz me on digits of pi or something. But no, I think he was really kind of kind and gentle, caring soul. And really for me, it was just absorbing his stories. And I always loved even sci-fi stories as a kid. And so being a part of his legacy of this actual huge, real life accomplishment was always something I took a lot of pride in.
And it's really clear this infectious enthusiasm for this subject is really passed off onto you and really inspiring you to do this. And I have one last question along this chain is, how did your experiences with these stories from your grandfather kind of reflect in Bonnie's own story? Was there like a specific moment in the book that you like really like took inspiration from your own life and then try to show it through Bonnie's?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the main messages in Bonnie, which I think is applicable, in STEM and the design process, is that kind of iterative process. So failing, but trying again. I think that was kind of a universal theme for me that I wanted to share with this book. And I think my grandfather kind of taught me that. And so that was something I wanted to imbue the story with on a personal note for me personally. I work in renewable energy. I work in kind of more the communications aspect of it currently. So I'm not as like an engineer myself, but I think it's like translating all those very like complicated topics to, regular people. So I think that that's something even in this book that I want to do, which was like talk about these very like, in children's picture books, how do you talk about these very complex STEM concepts, but for kids? So it was an interesting challenge for me to kind of distill that down, and something similar to what I'm doing on a regular basis for my job.
And I think you've done an absolutely wonderful job in like presenting the ideas. I really like the like kind of like steps in the engineering design process where like you put the numbers out next to each step and then you kind of went back to the very first number. I was like, that's so intuitive. And I think I definitely would have benefited if I was reading this when I was younger. I'm going to pass over the next question to Megan now.
So for our second question, we just kind of want to hear your thoughts about what you think the importance of STEM in our modern society is today.
That's a great question. So thank you both so much for coming up with these great questions. STEM, I think, is really important. It's vital. I think it inspires us to work together and to continue to push boundaries. And it's so vast, the different areas that we can, improve on. So, public health is something really relevant. Like now, that's all STEM. I think, space itself and space exploration is really interesting and has kind of helped push the boundaries of engineering and what's possible. I think, as I mentioned, I work in renewable energy. And so all of that is really cool to see now going into effect. So, you can have this academic study of things and, see how we can try to produce energy in a cleaner, greener way. And then, seeing that, basically seeing engineers innovate and continually try to iterate, in terms of coming up with better solutions for energy is really interesting.
Right. And also in your book, Bonnie's Rocket, it's very illustration heavy. So what would you say about STEAM as well?
Yeah, I really love the combination of including art with STEM because I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. A lot of times they're kind of positioned as such, but I think that they can really help support one another. I've been involved in a lot of other kind of artistic STEM combinations and showing how like dance can be STEM oriented. And so it's been a learning process for me as well. And I think it's just a reminder that both STEM and art can really cross boundaries and can affect multiple areas of life. And so they're not just siloed into one individual aspect. And I think that STEAM really does a great job of emphasizing that.
Okay, thank you. And now I'm going to pass it back to Yao for our third question.
Thank you again, Megan. And I want to go back into like your discussion that you said about space. Since like your grandfather always would tell you these stories about space, were you like a really big fan of space when you were younger?
Yes, I was a huge Star Trek nerd. I loved all that type of stuff. So like I said, whether it was fictional or in real life, I was always really enthusiastic about learning more. So writing this book actually kind of helped me dive even deeper into his story in a way that, when you're just listening to your grandfather tell stories, there's like a certain depth of which you understand it. And then when you're trying to write about it, there's a deeper sense that you have to kind of get into the root of it, understand, fact check. And so I did a lot of like research and dives into like NASA and Grumman's logs. And that was really exciting for me. And so I was, happy to have a story that hit on such a, passionate interest of mine because it made it easy to do research.
And would you say like still right now that you still have like a big, I guess, enthusiasm for space, or do you think that's kind of shifted into trying to impact the youth more of today?
Yeah, I think that, space is such an interesting and evolving area. I think what I'm also interested right now is, we were looking back at the Apollo 11 missions in Bonnie's story. But right now, NASA is actually undergoing a whole new project, which is the Artemis missions, which they're trying to send the first woman and person of color on the surface of the moon. So it's becoming all relevant again. And they're actually doing this mission to prepare for a manned mission to Mars. So I think that we're not done exploring space by a long shot. And there's still like many missions on the horizon. And we're also trying to be more equitable in how we're actually achieving those goals. So I think it's really cool. And I'm excited to see kind of where we go from here.
Definitely. And with like, I guess your own idea, have you ever like fancied the idea of wanting to go to space yourself? Do you think that may have been a track you may have wanted to follow anytime?
I think in theory, yes, it would be super cool to go to space. I don't think with my claustrophobia it would be like the best situation.
Mm.
I definitely think there are so many challenges that astronauts and the training that they have to go through, and just like the physical aspects of it too, not only just like the studies and everything that goes into it. So while theoretically I would love to, if the opportunity ever presented itself, I'm not sure if physically I could endure that.
Were you ever given any opportunities through like your grandfather or like writing this book to like get some firsthand interactions with like any of the spacesuits or like go see any of like the spacecrafts that are using the Apollo 11 mission?
That's a great question. So I asked my grandfather too if he had any like memorabilia, because he did work on the spacesuits and different things, and he was like, no.
Oh,
So
okay.
unfortunately, he doesn't have that. So I wasn't able to see that, but definitely was able to get his story. So for me, it was more like passing down of his story, not the physical aspects of it. I have gone to a lot of different museums and different things to see models and how things worked. So I was able to kind of see that, like, unfortunately, we don't have the lunar module itself that's still out there and was left behind in space. But we have models that we can look at and see how and, interact with them. So that's always been kind of cool for me to see and experience.
I think you can still like think the idea like you have that in space, it's always going to be there for like forever at this point. So maybe that can be a little, I guess, little thing that you can always think, oh, my grandfather is now permanently having his like connection in space.
That's
But
true.
thank you for that line. I'm going to pass off the next questions on the process to Megan now.
So can you talk a bit about the process that you had to get through to publish your book?
Absolutely. So it's not an easy process and it's not a fast process. And I can walk you through, there's many different paths. And so for each person, there's a new and different path to publication. For me, it was slightly unconventional because the first step usually in publishing your book is finding a literary agent. And so that person will help you and edit and then also send out your manuscript to a publishing house. And then from there, we'll get hopefully bought and then published. But my publisher, actually, Lee and Low, is one of the largest multicultural publishers for children's literature. And they do this great contest where they like put it out to all writers. So you don't have to have an agent. And that I really feel like opens up the door to a lot of creators. Because there's so many gatekeepers in publishing. So that's kind of one less gatekeeper. So that's actually how I got to my editor. She was interested in the book after reading it and decided to work with me. So I really appreciate what my editor did and kind of finding those stories and doing that outreach to especially marginalized voices. And that's kind of how I got published. Yeah.
Thank you. And were there any significant difficulties that you encountered while going through this whole process?
Yeah, I mean, I think one big one was COVID itself. So my book was originally slated to come out in 2020, which, as you know, was a very tumultuous year. And then with a lot of actually like shipping and production delays, it got pushed out for 2 more years. But I'm a big believer that everything happens for a reason. And I think, the delay kind of helped me prepare for the book coming out and everything. So I'm just grateful even for the way that everything happened. And yeah, I think there are a lot of other challenges. Like I think in terms of the manuscript, I had to rewrite it probably like majorly about like 6 times, had like 6 major revisions. But I think that's a pretty normal challenge actually for a lot of authors, and actually makes it so much better when you reach the end of that. So again, like the design process, it's an iterative process and you slowly make it better and learn from your mistakes.
Thank you. And as someone who has gone through this whole process, do you have any words of advice or wisdom that you would give to other young authors wanting to get their own books published?
Absolutely. So I think it's important to persevere. It's important to, you know, this is your project. You're the only one who can tell this story. It's important to not compare yourself with others and to just continue to, share your voice and believe in yourself. I think it's important, especially for like the practice of writing, to really hone your craft, to read widely across all genres, but especially in the one that you're writing, because I think that helps give you, sharpens your own skills. And also helps give you an idea of the context in which your book is going to be out in conversation with. And yeah, I think just trying to write as much as possible, but also making sure to, take care of yourself first. I think, mental health is the most important. So don't push yourself too hard. And, there's a lot of failure, and that's like totally fine and part of the course of getting published. So just keep going.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm going to hand it off to Yao for the next question.
Thank you, Ian. And would you say kind of making this book has been your own like mini engineering design process? Like you plan out the book and then you test out the different iterations of the book, you send the manuscript in, and then you kind of get the first product and like, oh, maybe it doesn't fly as well. And then you do like the next thing, you go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Bonnie's own journey of like trial and error was very similar to mine as a writer. And I think like, the test is like sometimes like, for her launching it for me was like showing another reader and then being like, oh, like, you find your trusted circle of people and they're like, oh, have you thought about this? Or like, hey, maybe it moves a little too slow here. And so they give you helpful feedback because you're so close to it sometimes. So I think that definitely it mirrored that. And, even for Bonnie's story particularly, I did a lot of research, like I said, scientifically and historically. And I also even had to do rocket launches myself to make sure that I was depicting things as accurately as possible. So I felt like it was a very metaphorical, a metaphor. The rockets were a metaphor for even the book writing process.
And like once the book was succeed and you built that rocket yourself in like the YouTube video, I remember watching that a while back where you showed like the audience how to make their own rocket. And then it really took off and you got onto like #1 charts for like, I think the 1900s children's history books on Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah, that was
like,
very exciting. Yeah.
That's absolutely amazing with like this book, how you're able to like impact this many people. And when you're talking about like the close friends you've had to aid you in this process, how did you end up choosing like the types of friends that Bonnie was working with specifically on creating this rocket?
Yeah, so that was in partnership with my editor and also the illustrator, Alina Chow, who is amazingly gifted and talented. And I think we wanted to, again, show that she had a diverse group of friends. I think, talking to even my family during that time and what it was like, they also had a diverse group of friends. It's not something that we saw necessarily depicted that often. So it was something that we wanted to emphasize and show that this is like, a group of friends who are just gravitating towards a common interest of STEM and building rockets together. And it doesn't matter what you look like or what your background is, you can, attempt to do this and try to do this. So I think that was kind of a conscious choice on our part to have her friends depicted in that way.
And I think it's an absolutely wonderful idea, just like bringing in this kind of diversity you don't really see, because a lot of books are like very much overcharacterized by like one specific ethnicity, or they're like undercharacterizing like a general group of different people. Like, what would you say, I think in general, for most books that are like related to depicting like different children's lessons and memories that they can learn, how should they try to include diversity within their own publications?
Yeah, so I think, you have to be authentic to yourself. I think like trying to push diversity just, to hit it or hit targets or, try it doesn't feel like as right and as real. So I think, if the story warrants it, to show that multicultural aspect is really great and definitely should be done. So I definitely think that it's an important thing to keep in mind. And I think I'd love to see more of it, just out there in the world. And this story for me was an opportunity to do that. So I definitely took advantage of it.
And what do you think is the most important when it comes to like promoting this diversity and surrounding yourself with friends who will support you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can, speak to that in my own life, to have like a lot of friends who come from all different walks of life, who look very different, and they've enriched my life so much, and I would be much poorer without them. And I think that they bring in really helpful and unique perspectives that help make me a better person, help give you, and like even for my writing projects, a deeper sense of how this is going to relate to other different groups. And I think that's really, really important. And to kind of get yourself out of your own head and your own space and see what it's like from someone else's. So it's a really great way to test your own work. And then just, naturally, I guess I have really great friends who look from all different shapes and sizes. And so I really appreciate that. And I recommend that, if you have the opportunity to be in a diverse setting, like it's amazing. And if you can have like friends that come from all different things, embrace that.
And definitely, like it's very clear, like with the amount of like effort and dedication you've put in this book, that your friends have been extremely impactful on just the overall success you've had with making this amazing publication to like target these youth and teach them about STEM. We do have like one or two more things before we conclude, so we're gonna be way earlier than anything was anticipated, which is awesome. So I'll pass that last question off to Megan before we do some closing things.
Thank you, Yao. So how would you say that your book is able to help promote the idea of cultural awareness?
Yeah, so for me, I think it was cultural awareness to show that immigrants had a big part in Apollo 11 and played a big role in making that happen. I think for me, it was also representing my Chinese American heritage. And so for me, that was really important. And the story isn't really blatantly about it necessarily. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, this is a Chinese story. I think that there are like definitely stories out there that are able to speak to cultural elements maybe more obviously. For me, I just wanted to show that we just happened to be a Chinese American family in the US at this time, and they happened to be on the engineering team and doing this. So for me, I think just it's important to get a diversity of stories out there. So some of them can focus on like the identity as a Chinese American, and others can have, like for me, a more STEM focus. And that's just an element of the story, because that's who I am and that's who the story was inspired by.
Yes. If Yao does not have any further questions, I think that about wraps up the interview. Thank you so much.
We really appreciate you coming. Do you have anything you want to say, I guess, to the general audience who's going to be seeing this video about the general message you have about your book by any chance?
Yeah, sure, of course. First of all, I'll just say thank you for having me. You both did such an amazing job and had really great questions. And I think I really appreciate what you're doing in your community to promote our stories, our Asian American stories, and our culture, and also promoting literacy, because I think that's really, really great. In terms of Bonnie's Rocket, I think for me, the main takeaways is to encourage young people as they go into STEM, to show the diversity of people working in STEM, and also to showcase the diverse team that was a part of Apollo 11. And then lastly, the main thing is just to try again after failing. So like I said, this kind of ties back to the main theme, which is just like, keep going, keep trying, whether it's, engineering or whether it's writing. There is, always a way for things to be achieved, even if it might seem like you're just hitting roadblock after roadblock. Mm-hmm. So keep trying and learn from all those mistakes.
I think that's a definitely deep, very deep and inspiring message. Like, we're going to do our best with this interview and we're going to make it work however we can. Keep on trying. Mm-hmm. Maybe it'll go, I think it's going to go great regardless. And do you have any ideas for future books you're going to write? Maybe not just Bonnie's Rocket, but like, do you have any ideas for expanding your collection?
Yes, I have, and I am working on some new books. None of it is public yet, but I will say that they are still picture books and they are still STEM oriented. And this new one that's probably the closest to being public has an environmental message. That's really important to me, and what I do on a daily basis for my job, and then just the people who've inspired me a lot growing up. So that's what I can share right now.
That's wonderful. Thank you for like giving those like little bit of details that you can share. And where can we find your book, Bonnie's Rocket, for purchase or for like even letting other people read it themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think you can find it pretty much on Amazon, where a lot of books are. If you want to find it, you can also find it on Barnes and Nobles and indie bookstores. So if you, I think, go onto my website, you can actually find maybe there's like an indie bookstore locator, so you can kind of order it from there, and also your local libraries. So if they don't currently stock it, you can actually request it, and that is, great. And hopefully they'll be able to get the book there.
And one more thing before we go, do you have any last plugs you kind of want to make for your own self and Bonnie's Rocket by any chance?
I think I've said all the plugs. Thank you for allowing me to talk about my future projects and different things. Yeah, I mean, I think one last thing I'll say is I'm a part of Quayle Journal, which is a literary organization, a nonprofit organization to help writers of color. So I want to continually do work, and that's writers of color across like all different races, nationalities. So I think it's really great, like you said, for us to kind of join together. A lot of times we have very specific groups, and those are really important too. And so, all of the work that we do all works together to help continue to promote diversity and different things. So I really appreciate, like you said, what we're doing here. And thank you for having me.
And thank you for letting us interview you. Megan, thank you so much for helping me out and getting this done. We don't have any more questions for you. And I want to say this has been absolutely wonderful, like meeting you. And it's like, this is the first time I've ever like met an author before. And I think this has like been one of the best experiences I've ever had, just like seeing like the genius brain behind this great book. And I'm looking forward to like seeing how we can really change hopefully like Middle Tennessee and like other states in the future with our project. So thank you again so much for coming. And without anything else, that's a wrap basically.
Thank you. So good on time.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. Thank you very much. And this is our first offer interview for our Asians Book Drive this year. And we really want to introduce your book, and given that it is very impactful and also full of inspiration to the all ages, not only like small kids, because I read the book, I said, oh yeah, we have to repeat trying and trying, don't give up what we believe. So it has an impact on me, at least. I mean, and we also put your book on the school list to the librarians in our school districts, and they will they approve it, and then they will use the donate money to buy it. And so just give you a heads up, and we really it's an honor for us to have this interview with you, and thank you for your support.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. I'll keep an eye out on kind of how the book drive goes and all your activities. Feel free to tag me in any, if you post on social media, and I'll do my best to also amplify the messages.
Thank you. So yeah.
Yes, I was gonna say, you're free to leave the meeting. We're gonna try to get everything coordinated with this. I'm gonna edit some video together. I'll send you an email with the YouTube link to the edited video if you have anything you want to say or change or anything like that. And hopefully we'll be able to move forward from there.
All right. Thank you so much, Jan, Megan, and Christine. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Yeah. Have a good day. Bye.
All right, let's end the recording here.